So I have a problem. I have this charcoal grill we use in our patio, but it's super annoying because it's so low to the ground. But I also have another problem. We don't have a coffee table on the patio. So I decided I should make a piece that can help out with both these problems. First, I started out by sketching a profile of the tabletop on this installation to see how it would look. Once I had the rough size I was looking for, I started to measure out pieces to cut from this melamine board I got from Home Depot. I got this really long trim board of melamine because it was actually cheaper than a whole sheet of melamine. And it was just the right size for the edges, which is what this is going to be. This is basically how thick the tabletop is going to be after the poured. I ended up leaving the short side longer than it needed to be, really just because I was lazy, but it didn't really seem to cause any problems, so I'm not too worried about that. I love these cheap corner clamps to get things into position. They're small enough to get a square corner, but definitely still double check them for square after using them. So once the outside frame was put together, I could glue it to the base, and I actually grabbed a sheet of 1/8 inch whiteboard for the base. This is also a lot cheaper than trying to buy a whole another sheet of melamine. And then I used some clamps to hold the piece in place while I got my hot glue gun ready. I used the hot glue gun to seal all the outside edges so no leaks could happen. I cut up some plywood so I could have some inserts where I could drill and connect some hairpin legs I have to the actual table. But the problem with adding any wood to concrete is that there's actually water in concrete that'll seep out over time, and so you have to seal the wood so it won't rot. So I used some polyurethane to coat each side of the plywood just to be safe, and then once that was dry, that was all good to go. I've watched a lot of videos of concrete projects where people put rigid insulation into the concrete pour to lessen the amount of concrete needed, as well as to reduce the weight of the project. So I cut up this rigid insulation to the same size as those plywood inserts so it can sit right underneath them. The last insert I need to cut was this concrete form tube. This is where the grill's going to slide into. And usually people pour the concrete into the tube, but I'm just going to pour it on the outside of the tube so there's that void where the charcoal grill slots right in. Then once I had the form and the tube all glued down, I took some silicone to seal the interior edges of the mold. Again, this just makes sure there's no leaks, but it also gives you a nice round finish edge once the concrete cures. Okay, and the last step I actually used was to add some paste wax to the whole mold. So I took the clamps off and then rubbed on like a nice little coat of paste wax to every edge that has concrete going into it. This will just help the concrete pop out once it's been cured as well. Now finally we're at the concrete pour, and I just picked up these cheap bags of Quikrete from Home Depot, and I was a little bit worried at first because they have a lot of aggregate in them, so a lot of big pieces of gravel, and I was worried that the gravel would show up in the final pour. But after everything cured, it looked like it wasn't too much of a deal. I started mixing the concrete with this paddle attachment on a drill, but it didn't seem like it was mixing up the concrete super well. So I went and grabbed a shovel and tried to mix it up with that, and it worked so much better. So don't even mess around with this, just go for the shovel. So I went ahead and poured the first layer and made sure it was even and level, and then I was okay to add the fire bricks. The thing that I do think is nice about concrete, though, is that you can always add small amounts of either water or mix, and this helps take the pressure off trying to get the perfect ratio the first time around. And you kind of just add or subtract as you need of each. I watched a lot of concrete projects on YouTube, but this is by far my largest concrete project I've ever attempted. I did my best to get the consistency of mushy oatmeal like everyone says you need, and I figured if I messed up the ratio, I would just have to deal with it, but I wasn't stressing about it too much. One thing I realized I could have done better was to pour more concrete in the mold first, and then add the pieces and push them down. This way, we could have got all the pieces flush with the edge of the mold. Then, after waiting for 2 days, we went ahead and popped the tabletop out of the mold. And two things I noticed instantly. One, the tabletop was heavy as hell. And I realized this after the fact when I did the math. We used 3 50-pound bags of concrete for the whole entire pour, plus the water and the inserts, and so this table was heavy. But another cool thing about the pour after I ripped off the mold was that the whiteboard made the top super smooth. Like, more smooth than the edges of the melamine, which are already pretty smooth. Definitely would recommend if you're trying to get a smooth finish to use whiteboard as part of your mold. I flipped the whole thing back over and gave another day to dry, and you can see it's a little bit grayer than it was on the other shot where it was still pretty dark. But I took my palm sounder to it and went over all the edges and the underside to sand it down a little bit better than it was after just being poured. Now that there's insulation and plywood on the very bottom, it's super easy just to attach some legs to it. And so you take your pick, but I had hairpin legs lying around and they were the perfect height for us. And so we went ahead and just attached them. Whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, but I don't wanna jinx it, baby. Let's not get the very last step I did was to take that same paste wax I used to seal the mold and actually add it to the tabletop. So the top was already smooth and it is concrete, so it's gonna be able to withstand any weathering fairly well for a while, I hope. But this paste wax is just another little extra layer to hopefully seal it and keep water out of it. But with that, it was all ready to go. And I gotta say, this thing is awesome. It sits at the perfect height where we can sit on the couch and reach over and grill. The charcoal grill we have is super cheap, but it fits perfectly in the opening. And one extra cool thing I was hoping would happen is that the grill gets so hot and it actually transfers some of that heat to the concrete, and the concrete will hold on to that heat. So like on a cool evening, the table itself is actually warm and kind of a heat source, so that's super cool as well. But anyway, just want to say thanks for watching. See you next time.